Rana. We had a great conversation beforehand. And the way I want to start this conversation is by allowing them to give us in 1 minute, try to keep it 1 minute, to tell your life story, and you're able to close with a line in that 1 minute about what would you love to share with the young people that are watching this event live stream that do you think has been your greatest lesson for them to follow you? So I'll begin with Rana. So Rana, the floor is yours. You have a tremendous career. I'm so impressed. And you're also doing your PhD. You have been an entrepreneur, social entrepreneur. You're Kurdish American. You've been in the UAE. So it's really interesting to hear your story. Go ahead, Rana.
Thank you so much. So my name is Rana Hajirasouli. Thank you very much for the introduction, sir. In one short pitch, essentially, I grew up in the UAE where things were very scarce. So trying to create abundance out of scarcity is my passion. I have a climate technology startup that offers governments and SMEs an opportunity to share these resources and profit from it. I'm also doing my PhD at Cambridge around this very area. And I think my one main takeaway that always keeps me driven and motivated is it's really important, no matter what work we're doing in climate, is to remember and try to reflect on who gets access to what resources and when, and try to always navigate the space and share whatever kind of good fortunes come towards us.
Thank you, Rana. Well, that was less than 1 minute, so that was very effective. Pearly, you come from Thailand.
Yes, sir.
Which is a beautiful country.
Thank you.
And Thailand, it's all about magic. But at the same time, you're connected to two very interesting sectors. You have been an entrepreneur in B2C relationships, but you have also been working on robotics and the impact of robotics in security, but also in risk management. So I also have to say that you are ambassador for One Young World and that you organized in 2015 the One Young World Summit in Thailand.
Yes.
I also have to say today that I am in the role of being the husband to one of the One Young World's promoter worldwide. My wife, Maria Juliana, has been working with One Young World, and she always says that every ambassador has its own magic. So tell us about your story and tell us about what's next for you in terms of achievements that can have an impact for humanity.
Sure. So my name is Pearly Ingkakul. I'm from Bangkok, Thailand, but I grew up in Australia and Switzerland. And basically, I started my career in hospitality, this and that, and then I jumped into nonprofit. I was the youngest executive director of United Nations Global Compact, and we opened the first office in Bangkok 3 years ago. And now I have my own fintech company, which is Neobank. We've been operating for a year and a half. Basically, that's been helping middle class and SMEs into loans, but not like a bank kind of way. And now I'm a partner at AI Robotics Ventures in Bangkok, and we do drones, we do robotics, we do submarines, and everything is run on AI and big machine learning. So, today I really want to discuss how we can help farmers around the world and using AI and how the spillover of AI can do actually great things and not bad things for climate change.
Thank you, Pearly. That was brilliant. And Federico, you're from Colombia, man. And I can tell that you have that blend of being bicultural, multicultural, but you're a paisa, man. You have the paisa innovative character. You're from Antioquia. You were telling me stories about your family, but you were also telling me about your ventures, things that you have done in the past and things you're doing today. Tell us your story, and also what would be that lesson that you would love to share with the people that are following us online.
Yeah, so I believe the underlying denominator has been living my life with empathy and having a sense of agency, how you can impact others and also your surroundings. So in that sense, I've been able to study development economics, learn about high-tech companies and a venture capital fund here in the Middle East. But then coming back to Colombia and being able to understand the deep issues of some of the rural communities and having an idea how I can transform them through market-based mechanisms. So all this started with an exports business and then pivoted into how we can transform the landscapes, how we can use nature-based solutions, ecosystem restoration projects, and giving these communities additional income streams. Therefore, tackling the underlying issues of deforestation, which is poverty and economic security. So in that sense, when you're able to create a systems change and being able not only to work with a market-based mechanisms, but understanding how you can collaborate with other sectors. So for example, with the public or with the multilateral sector. In this sense, I was able to partner with the UN International Trade Center, do a diagnostic of the Colombian entrepreneurship ecosystem, and also bring funding from the South Korean government in order to help youth in Colombia. And it's also very important to highlight the different trainings and how was helped during President Duque administration in terms of data science, entrepreneurship, and also understanding the different public policy initiatives that were being undertaken during his administration.
The lesson. What's the lesson?
And the lesson would be able to understand with empathy what are other people's challenges and then tackle those issues at first hand.
Well, this is amazing because, I mean, your stories are really inspiring. And we're in COP28, where the whole planet is putting an eye on these conversations that are taking place here at the UAE. We have seen great announcements in this week. We saw the Loss and Damages Fund that is very important to compensate the Global South. We have seen the UAE 30 billion fund that has been announced. There's a great discussion about new technologies in order to tackle decarbonization. So for me, this is just a great COP in a sense that the private sector has taken a strong lead. You're also entrepreneurs, so you want to do things that are meaningful in business, but you have it with a purpose, which is the conscient capitalism scope. So a lot of people ask me, 28 COPs, isn't that too much? And so people tend to say there are good COPs and bad COPs. So I want to hear from you whether you think this is a good COP and why, and what will be the contribution of the sector you are working in order to solve many of the challenges we have been discussing in the last week. So I'll begin with you, Federico.
I would think this is a great COP because when you understand also the emissions that are coming from the fossil fuels industry, but you have to work together and see how you can leverage these different types of mechanisms, not only to fund new technologies, but also in order to instate different policies that are going to help the countries reach the different targets, which we are really lacking the proper funding and inclusion of some of the different stakeholders that should be there. So this is the right time to be here. And for example, in the nature-based solution space, there was actually some agreements in how it should be included in the global stocktake. And I look forward to not only having it on paper, but also being implemented and having real actions towards it. And that's what really makes a good COP.
That's a great answer, Federico. Pearly.
Yeah, so...
But let me also add something to your question.
Sure.
So I want to know whether you think it's a good COP, bad COP, but also I want to hear from you how the robotics industry is going to play, or you think can play, a very dynamic role tackling climate change.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's a good COP, because I'm here. And
Good.
to talk about AI and robotics in depth. So I think AI and robotics can play a massive role in climate change because, for example, the nature-based development, credit, carbon credit is a big deal in Thailand right now and around the world. So we use AI to track that. And why is AI better than human? it's more precise. So basically, what we do with farmers in Thailand is that we use a satellite from the European Space Agency to track down the forest or farms, and then we do what we call it ground truth. What we do with ground truth is that AI, satellite down. Then we, instead of cutting 10, 20 trees, we cut one tree with this dimension, with that dimension. Then we see how much carbon credits coming out of there. It's more precise. But there's a little bit concern with the fact that AI may not be accurate as much as human, as much as manual. So we're very conservative when we do this kind of ground truth.
Well, that's good. And let me ask you something. A lot of people tend to analyze AI, and I heard a phrase that someone shared, and they said that AI was like nuclear technology. So you can either do great things with it, but it also can be very dangerous. If you were to put that on a balance, what would you say? That is, AI is going to make the world much better, or is it going to put us in more risk?
I really believe that AI will make the world a better place. That's coming from me because I work in AI for many years now, and with robotics as well. But the thing is that what we have to understand is that AI cannot just play the role by themselves. We need human being as well. We need human. We need to train people with AI, to work along with AI. Because, I mean, a lot of people come up to me as well, like, Pearly, AI is taking over the manpower. AI is taking over, jobs. And I disagree with that, because that's not true. I mean, like, we have over 400 or 500 people work in our company right now at ARV, and they're all basically working side by side with AI. And, I mean, it's proven to be massive amount of generation after generation with farmers, with the forest, everything that AI have been proven that it's working really well. Yeah.
Rana, good cop, bad cop? I want to hear from you on that. And I also want to ask you in the fields that you're getting into, and maybe share a little bit about your PhD and how you're connecting your PhD with entrepreneurship. How do you think in the area that you're involved in is going to contribute to face the climate crisis we suffer now globally?
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that question. Currently, I would start off by saying that I think it's a great COP because there's a huge amount of representation. We also have an Indigenous Peoples Day. There is plenty of mobilization around the private sector at the moment. And although I'm not a technical background like my lovely panelists in terms of AI, we're also deploying it. So the way that I see it is that we have a serious industrial problem. Until today, since the Industrial Revolution, we've mined about 700 million tons of copper alone. These are critical minerals and materials and metals we're going to need to get to net zero. So when we talk about net zero and we talk about climate change, we need to have a reflection in terms of where is all of this coming from? It's coming from the lithium triangle. It's coming from Congo. We are sacrificing the well-being of the global south to meet the demands of the global north to drive what we call a clean car. Is it really clean? What are we currently doing with lithium ion batteries? So my PhD kind of studies this complex adaptive system and tries to capture in simple terms, what is the stuff that we need? How much emissions does it actually emit today? And what can we really do to leverage technology to better give access to the information that people need to make better decisions? So to Pearly's point, we're not trying to replace technology or say it's a one-size-fits-all solution. On the contrary, the work that we do is try to democratize this access to sustainability to the people that don't have that right of choice, to understand what are the secondary materials in the market that we could make use of in case our supply chain is hit, right? Because 45% actually of the global emissions is just created from the stuff that we use every day. These are within supply chains. Our entire supply chain was built off of the precedent of uninterrupted access to the most energy dense form, the most dense form of energy we've ever seen, which is fossil fuels. So if we're moving away from that, how do we implement the circular economy? And what is the role of the average person, and how can governments enable that?
Pearly, now's your turn to start first. Robotics, you've mentioned a lot of interesting things about robotics. I come from Colombia, and Colombia is an Amazonic country. 35% of our territory is Amazonic land. The Amazon is one of the most important biodiverse spots in the planet, almost 20% of the world biodiversity. But we have lost in the last 40 years more than France and Germany together due to deforestation. Give me an idea, just a thought. How do you think, for example, robotics and AI can help us tackle one of the most dangerous issues in the global south when it comes to climate change? And I just give you this number. In the case of Latin America, negative use of land and deforestation is 47% of our emissions. How do you think AI and robotics can help us confront the deforestation?
Yeah, so what I've experienced in Thailand as well, there's a lot of deforestation in Thailand, and we use AI and robotics to combat with that by training people, by training farmers, by training forest guards, using, for example, using an app, which we have. Our business unit, it's called Varuna. There's an app, and they can go into that app and they can measure their own land. Or the forest guards can go in there, and then AI, we have drones flying around the forest. And I mean, you can use this as well. I mean, I'm sure you can have this, and I'm sure you're already using this. We have drones flying around, surveillancing, the forest and the farm, and noticing what is going wrong. Because on the drone, it's not just drone itself that's flying around. There's AI CCTV on it. And people can drive the drone from your home. And the range is crazy. And there's a box, which is robotics box, it's called Horse. And the drone, it's called Phoenix. Phoenix can drive for 40 kilometers per time, and whatever condition it is, it's fine. Rain, pouring down, sunshine, snow, whatever, it's fine. So this is a use case that we've been doing in Thailand, and it's been working really well. But the thing is that with a country like Thailand, a lot of farmers and forest guards, they don't understand technology, and that is a challenge. So having to train them, it's another challenge as well. So I think this is something that around the world, even in Colombia, training matters the most for people to understand technology, and then that will work.
Thank you, Pearly. Rana, you were talking about the transition, but I want to maybe ask you a more personal question. What behaviors are you embracing as a person to reduce your own individual carbon footprint that you think you can share with many of the young leaders that are following us this morning?
Thank you so much for that. I love this question because, number one, I'm very cheap as a person, so I like to spend as least money as possible. So personally, I love thrift shopping. I make some of my own powders and seasonings at home from kind of vegetable peels. So I think it's really important to feel very connected to nature. And often many people think that, you need to necessarily live in a biodiverse, rich place. And they wouldn't think the desert is actually very rich in biodiversity. So I took this amazing course during lockdown, and it was called biomimicry. So the practice of biomimicry is actually emulating nature's genius, 3.8 billion years of genius. So as in, if we look around, we take inspiration from the Arabian oryx. It manipulates its metabolic function to be able to preserve energy more. And we can apply these engineering principles, for example, in practice, when it comes to looking at energy efficient buildings. So actually, for me, of course, reducing my footprint is important, but also the context is quite important for me. So pulling inspiration from nature, because it's got the largest data bank of solutions, and we're not that innovative actually. Nature's done it first. So anytime I have an issue, if I want to save some energy, or if I'm feeling anxious, I always ask, how does nature do it? I look for the system, whether it's on a macro systems level or a molecular level, and I will always find the answer. I know that's quirky though, so please excuse that.
Well, I published a book this week about the Green Manifesto for Latin America, and I had this chapter called Biodiverse Citizens, because we have a chapter on biodiverse cities, and it's how cities should protect biodiversity. And that takes me to you, Federico. So, how do you think, from your entrepreneurial experience, that you can change behaviors from citizens so that they can also contribute reducing the carbon footprint, and at the same time open the scope for business opportunities regarding those changes of behavior?
Of course, Mr. President. So, what inspires me is my mentor, and she was the lady that had the idea to implement the cable car system in Medellin, which ended up transforming the massive transportation systems in emerging markets, especially in city slums. So from that perspective, it's all about creating the right incentives, being able to funnel the proper funding in order to change those behaviors, not only for the people that need it the most, but also from the ones that are polluting. So for example, changing the transportation systems, being able to create circular economies, and in that sense, not forcing it, but changing those incentive mechanisms in order for people to actually do it, and not just for the sake of it.
Good. Okay, now I'm going to start asking you personal questions. That's a prerogative that I have. So you just have to answer. Tell me about the person that has been the most important influence for who you are and why. I'll begin with you, Federico.
And I'll continue with my mentor. I'll mention her name. She is Janet Cardona. And being able to be a woman that was able to convince not only the council members in the city of Medellin, but also being able to convince the manufacturers of these cable cars that eventually, after getting no's from Italy, Austria, Spain, she convinced the French manufacturers and was able to take the system, and also through different administrations. So that means that being resilient and being able to push forward innovative ideas and being able to get there and transform the lives of millions of people is really something that inspires me and has been ultimate energy point in my career.
Pearly.
Who inspired me? I will say my father. He taught me all the values that I have from a very young age until today. It's giving and empathy. And the values that I have to this day, I just told Rana about it. There's three things, core things that I believe in. That I want to be a good daughter to my parents. I want to be a good citizen to Thailand. And I want to be a good citizen to the world. And he taught me that, and I live that. I wake up every day thinking about it.
How old is him?
He's 79. Yeah.
Nice. Rana, who inspired you?
Similarly, I think I would probably say my mother. She's, been through a lot throughout her life, and no matter what, she comes out extremely resilient, and she's highly pragmatic. So I really appreciate that lens. And, she also influenced me to say, sustainability, great, but so what, So that made me think on a deeper level, how can we really claim to want to protect nature if we can't value it, if we don't understand, how we can actually make most use of it? And of course, being extremely kind of, ready for any situations and not being limited by my gender, because of course it's without saying that in the Middle East, there is a certain perception about women here, which is changing now. But she taught me how, as a really strong, effective, and empathetic leader, which she has been to her community, that you can really make your own strides forward and find your own place and where you belong in the world.
So another personal question, and we have in the streaming thousands of youngsters around the world that are looking at you and are saying, wow, What a success story. Three very successful young entrepreneurs, ambassadors of One Young World, sharing their experience. But also, entrepreneurship has to pass for some stages of failure that make you stronger, that give you lessons. So, Rana, let me begin with you. Telling us about your biggest failure ever and what you learned from it and how it made you a better person.
Honestly, sir, my biggest failure generally, I think, is networking in the sales part. I am absolutely terrible at it. So whenever I have the biggest opportunity, I just kind of like freeze up and go awkward. And then I ask them a question that makes them uncomfortable. And then I'm like, oh, I should have probably learned how to maybe learn a little bit more, social skills. But as an entrepreneur, I never wanted to be a CEO. It wasn't something I wanted to do. I found the problem, I became obsessed with it, and I loved it. So I think as an entrepreneur, the best thing that I've learned is not to solutionize too early. Don't get attached to your solutions. They will change. It might look different. If you love the problem, I feel that that's 50% of the solution already.
Okay, Pearly.
Honestly, it's I work way too hard as an entrepreneur because I'm very ambitious as a person. So that took a big toll on my health. Mental health, physical health. So I want to tell the young leaders that's watching now, right now, streaming or later on, prioritize your health, mental health, physical health. Because no matter how great you are, no matter how many funding you get, millions and millions of dollars, to basically, create your own company, it's not worth it. You need to balance it out. I know it's hard to do so. I used to sleep 3-4 hours a night or less.
How much are
And
you sleeping now?
Now I sleep 6 hours. Yeah, basically the flight from Bangkok to here, and then the flight back tonight.
Federico, failure lesson.
That's an amazing question, and you should all learn from them, because vicarious learning is the best way of how we can grow. And I actually want to recommend a book named Why Startups Fail by a Harvard Business School professor. But my biggest failure was during the pandemic, where I saw an opportunity to create like a small digital startup. I raised funding from a Japanese investor. However, the tech aspect of the business was taking longer than expected. And I didn't take the right mentorship. So when you can seek the right people, not only in the business sense, but also it could be in the technology or it could be in mental health. But when you reach out to people, they actually want to help. And when you learn about their failures, you can actually overcome and be able to save all that burdens, time and energy and money actually from failure. So learning from others is the best way really to push forward and keep going.
One of the things that for me, in my own life has inspired me in some sort of way is philosophy. And out of philosophy, the Stoics have inspired me a lot. And they're now great books about the Stoics. But they reflected on the cardinal virtues of human being. So they talked about courage, which is, embracing change, starting something that you believe in, even if the common wisdom is not on your side. They talked about self-discipline. They talked about justice, and they also talked about wisdom. But I wanted to ask you because, a lot of people want to know how you made your success possible. What are the virtues, if you were to select 1, 2, or 3, not more than 4, because we want to have more time for the conversation. What virtues do you think are moving your heart and your daily force to achieve better things without losing humbleness, and as you well said, the three of you, without losing empathy? Who wants to pick it up first?
Yeah, I'll go. I think resilience. Yeah, for sure.
How do you define resilience? It's my favorite word.
Resilience is basically not giving up. Always keep going. Even though there's setbacks, you keep on going and pushing forward. Resilience is something that I put it dear to my heart because that's how I made One Young World Bangkok happen. It was tough because for One Young World to come to Bangkok in 2015 during coup d'etat, who would have come? Kofi Annan, the late Kofi Annan, he came to 2015 in Bangkok. I mean, yeah, I mean, the prime minister at that time, during the coup, there was no freedom of speech. And One Young World, it's about freedom of speech, for youth to have a stage, a place to stand on and talk about everything. I spent 3 months at the parliament in front of the prime minister's office. 3 months. Every single day, I go in there and I'm like, please, I want 5 days freedom of speech. Last day, he's like, I'll sign it for you, Pearly. Oh. He signed freedom of speech for 5 days for One Young World, for youth to talk about, basically, I'm sorry to say this, talk shit about the government. So, yeah.
Rana.
Yeah, I would say humility for me, because I guess maybe drawing on some of Plato's cardinal virtues, truth-seeking is very important, and truth changes, as we know. It could be objective, it could be subjective, and listening and constantly learning helps really drive that wisdom forward. So for me, it's always listening more than speaking. As my mom always says, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I talk a lot, so maybe I don't always stand up to that. But humility is very important, because if we're really seeking to address global problems, sometimes you might be working on something that does not necessarily implicate you, but you're a small puzzle piece to that. So that is, in my opinion, a really important thing that I try my best to stand by.
How about you, Federico?
Yeah, going back to Seneca and Marcus Aurelio on really focusing on what you can control, and being able to achieve a lot of things with that mental framework, what I realize is that when you start reaching positions of power and you have some influence, but you want to do a positive impact, then sometimes there's really kind of some poisons of power, and they're like hubris and ego. But the best antidotes, or in this sense, kind of the values you can practice, could be being humble and have empathy, and through active listening and being able to understand others. I think those are great values everyone should have in mind, especially when you have the unique opportunity to impact, if not thousands, but also millions of people.
Well, I think the three of you have mentioned, very important virtues. I also told you when we were preparing the panel that I was going to ask you one question. And you said you had to think about it. But if you had an Aladdin lamp and you were to ask the genius for one wish to come true in the field that you're working, to have a better impact for humanity, what would you ask? So, Federico, take it first.
Okay, I'll go with artificial general intelligence. Because when you start seeing the impact that current AI or language learning models have had on the productivity worldwide, and why even like some magazines like The Economist have said that it really has evaded from like some economic recessions, then you understand how by integrating artificial general intelligence into different segments of, let's say, the climate space. It could be into nature, biology, could be robotics, could be complex adaptive systems. Then you can have that intersectional impact and being able to create those efficiencies that maybe sometimes by econometric models or correlations are not really seen from above. So there's a lot more than being afraid of that, and by having the proper safeguards, hopefully by governments, then we can really evade those fears that currently AI has.
That's a big wish. I think the genius will need a notebook to take notes. But it's a great wish. Pearly, wish.
My wish is basically very similar to you. AI as one world, where government, where institutions, where all big companies, large conglomerate can understand what AI is all about, and a lot of funding from government sector. I think that is very important for AI to move forward, and collaboration between countries. Yep.
Rana.
Short.
I think mine is on visibility, because a lot of our problems can be resolved if we have visibility over the resources that we have locally. So my one wish to the genie, the magical genie out there, would be to give all of the people of the world access to the visibility of those resources they need to thrive, not just survive, and make most use of them.
So let me ask our organizers, how much time do we have? Just to see if we're going on schedule? Because I still have many questions. What's that? 20 minutes, okay. So that's good.
That's good.
Because that allows me to pick on that same question that you had as a wish. What technology do you think the world will see in the next 5 years that will disrupt climate policy? Some people have said it's going to be maybe new forms of energy or energy storage and energy distribution. Other people have said, well, it might be fusion energy. Other people have said, well, we might change the way we conceive transportation with autonomous vehicles, for example. Other people have said, maybe design thinking and the combination of AI through a massive education system so that we can expand best quality for most of the people in the planet, primarily in the global south. Other people say, well, it's going to be precision agriculture. There are a lot of thoughts about these technologies. You're in the cutting edge of those technologies. So I want to hear from you, which technologies do you think are going to be very disruptive, and how the young people that are watching us can maybe find an opportunity there? What would be your advice? Rana.
I think the first one is definitely quantum computing. While we're not there yet, it's going to fundamentally transform the way we even view energy, distribute energy, store energy, and really cut to the core of, mathematical problems that we didn't think were possible. So this will change the way that we, operate, the way that we live, and perhaps even to a certain extent, it may even be dangerous if it's not regulated. So I think on the macro level, that's something that we can see quite, in the long-term future. But in the short term, I think AI is actually taking the forefront in many different ways. It's helping us understand interconnected puzzle pieces that can really help, have these technological spillover effects. So if we, take an example of, let's say, Google's DeepMind, for example, or Watson at IBM. These are the types of technologies that we're understanding how we can reduce our energy consumption, let's say by 40% in one specific context. That can then be translated over into more energy efficient buildings, for example, and the way that we manage those resources. So I think those are kind of the top two that we can see in the long term and perhaps in the short term.
Pearly.
I definitely believe in agriculture technology, because I think AI can play a big role in this, because this has to do with carbon credits. So, but there's a downside to it if it's not regulated, because government need to come up with regulations. Because right now I feel like, I don't know about other countries, but I feel like Thailand is being taken advantage of because we have so much forest. And then, bigger countries, wealthier countries have been taking advantage of us, buying our carbon credits and everything so they can meet their emission, their credits. So I think that, having to learn more about agri-tech, that young leaders can protect their own country, from being taken advantage of. I think that's really important. Yeah.
Federico.
So when we think about electrifying our transportation systems, I would say nuclear fusion is imperative, especially when we understand that we can have modular nuclear plants that don't rely as much on the grid. So if it can be properly regulated and built pretty fast, because nuclear plants can take 15, 20 years to be built, then I think we can really change that energy matrix, not only in developed countries, but also in emerging markets.
Tom Friedman, who has been a very well regarded and praised author, who wrote a book about climate long time ago, almost 10 years ago. It was called Hot, Flat, and Crowded. He had a chapter in that book that was called Being China for a Day, which literally what he meant was not literally China, but was what he was saying is, if you had the capacity to make a decision that is not attached to parliamentary discussions, building a majority, trying to generate the boldest consensus possible, but if there was one decision that you could make, being a head of state, or if we can put it hypothetically, being the ruler of the planet, in order to improve people's lives, what would that decision be? Who wants to pick it up first?
Yeah.
Rana is thinking
Sorry.
about it.
Do you want to go?
Bernie, you're too fast, man.
That's quick. Yeah.
No,
you're
because
sharp.
I mean,
Time for
like,
coffee.
I mean, back in the days when I was at Harvard as well, I wanted to be at Kennedy School. I wanted to be a prime minister. So I always have so many thoughts in my head already what I wanted to do. So I mean, education definitely is number one for me. Education for all people, no matter how rich, how poor you are, everything is at equal. You get the same education everywhere. Whether, I mean, right now, seriously, like I'm working on Drone Racing League, where there's a STEM program for 500 universities.
But let me
and schools.
interrupt.
Yeah.
If you say education, I would say that's the policy. But tell me a decision that you will make that would improve the life of the planet. One decision that you would take.
One decision, I think it will just, like I mentioned, I think it's education for all. Yeah, that's it.
Massify education.
Yeah, definitely in like massive scale. Yeah, if I can run a country or this world, education.
Federico, one decision.
One decision, global carbon tax. Going back to the incentive systems I was mentioning earlier, when you can really force through these mechanisms, I think we would close the loop and be able to, with one decision, be able to
Global
help
carbon
towards
tax. That's a
climate
good
change.
one.
Yeah.
How about you, Rana?
Zero waste to landfill. Plain and simple. Zero waste to landfill. Build the infrastructure for it and just reinforce that. And that's the most harsh and heavy way to go about it.
Okay, well, those three are very interesting ones. So what I'm going to do is follow up on your responses. So you say zero landfills. So zero landfills is also connected with one solution, that is waste to energy. And in order to pass from waste to energy, there have been some technologies, some that have been questioned, and some that are either exploratory or highly costly. So incineration, by also capturing methane and other gases, it's one, but the other one is plasma technology. What would you connect with that decision in terms of the technology to embrace something like that?
I think, to be honest, sir, I wouldn't really focus necessarily on the energy piece, because on one hand, we are so focused about carbon, but there's other extremely potent greenhouse gas emissions, right? Like nitrogen, that's as a symptom of, synthetic fertilizers, for example, that's 300 times more potent. We have methane as well. So this carbon tunnel vision has gotten us to a stage where we've, like, again, commodified this with this very capitalist, Western imperialist mindset, and I really am personally against this. So for me, it would not just necessarily be, can we create energy out of it? Would be, can we actually plug this, intelligently into the system to be able to use these secondary material resources, or re-export them if we need to, or really understand how we can, take most advantage of these materials, whether it's composting for soil health, or finding other ways to, for example, upcycle them or put them into the infrastructure to create more value-added utility products and services for people. So that would be my angle on it.
So it would be the three R's: reuse, reduce, recycle, and having them as a general principle, and then try to find the solutions.
And the extended R's. I think there's
extended.
12 R's now,
I
actually.
think that's a brilliant. I mean, I really like that answer, because you're putting us to think a lot on, especially in the global south, where landfills are still a big part of the equation. But Pearly, you said massify education. But then a lot of people have also asked themselves that have been analysts of the education system whether we really need to change the way we think about education. And I remember that one great thinker in the UK said, well, education, the way we have conceived it so far, has been more or less aligned with the industrial or the revolution or the illustration movement where, all the kids go for 13 years to school, then they graduate, then they have a combination of STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. And some have spoken about STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And I really want to ask you, I agree with you on massifying education. By the way, Rana, I also agree with you on landfills. But when you talk about massifying education, what changes would you make to education in order to make it more humane?
Yep.
Bring back humanism, combine it with technology, and try to make it less boring.
Yeah. No, I'm actually glad you mentioned all of the sentences that you just spoke about. I disagree with traditional education. I really do. Because I think it's a waste of time. When I hire my staff, I don't look at their educational background. I don't care where they go to school, honestly. It's all about hands-on. I want education around the world, especially like in Thailand, where I'm from. And I want it to be hands-on. I want it to be on AI. I want it to be on something that is going to benefit them in the future. And it's going to benefit our country. It's going to benefit the world. Not going to, doing algebra, not doing this, not doing that, where you don't use that, in the end. So I disagree with traditional education. I want AI education.
Good.
Okay.
I like that.
Thank you,
You've
sir.
spoken a lot about AI. So,
I love it.
So, you mentioned global tax on carbon. That's one of the areas where I have been involved in the last years, and in this COP, I participated in a roundtable, and I said something that is worrying me. Like I agree that carbon pricing is very important. You won't have a good carbon tax unless you have a good carbon price. But my worry is that pricing has been so attached to the global north discussion that I think the global south has been left behind. And the thing is, if you create a big gap, it's going to be more difficult for global south projects to be able to connect with the funding when it comes to carbon credit markets. And I said that even if we consider a global tax in the global north, it'll be very important that part of that taxation will have a way to compensate the past externalities on developing countries and maybe deploy that capital through GCF or other kind of mechanisms. So I wanted to ask you, how would you make that global tax on carbon more just and more fair in terms of distributing to pay for past externalities in the global south?
Okay, that's a great question. And in my opinion, based on what I've read on the global carbon tax and also my involvement in some of the voluntary and regulatory carbon markets, I do believe it should be segmented and being able to understand how you are able to avoid these unintended consequences that are really taking into account when you really go into the global discussion on these taxes. So it would be based on really directing the funding to the rural communities that are at first going through incredible times and they're the most affected by the climate change. But if you're able to reduce deforestation, like going on to a specific, if you're able to give them like additional income streams and reduce directly deforestation, then I think that's at least a first step, and it would have to involve a lot of research because I think it should not be a wrong-headed discussion and just go into it. There should be more research.
Okay, I have invited for this panel two imaginary guests that did not make it to COP28. And they're, in your imagination, they're seated here. Let me introduce President Joe Biden, and let me introduce you President Xi Jinping. You have them here. So you have one advice to give each about what the world is expecting from them, and maybe related to the impact that it has produced that they didn't come to COP28, which is not a good news. But you have them here. Who wants to give the advice to Chi and Joe right away?
Yeah, so what's up, Joe? My advice to you is to mind your own